Hey guys, welcome back to NASCAR Fantasy Fastlane. I'm Jessica Ruffin here with NBC Sports Steve Letarte. Plenty of excitement last week at Las Vegas, Steve, and you know, first race of the playoffs. We're headed to Richmond this week for the second race. So what do you expect for this weekend?
Well, more action for sure. Richmond is a short track, 3/4 of a mile underneath the lights on a Saturday night. It's normally where sparks flare, and after last week's race, I think this is going to be the same sort of race. There's so much on the line. We saw big names have trouble. Denny Hamlin, Eric Jones, two Gibbs drivers well below the cutoff line. So there's going to be some gambling because that third race, that Charlotte road course, it still looms. Drivers have to have a good run at Richmond.
All right, well, who are you looking at to avoid this week when you look at your lineup?
Well, surprisingly, I have two playoff drivers that I'm going to avoid, and they're big names. You would think Ryan Blaney and Martin Truex Jr. would be considered for your lineup, but when you look at their numbers, Ryan Blaney, he's been 18th or worse in 5 Richmond starts. That is not going to get it done. I expect playoff drivers to fill the top 10. Much the same for Martin Truex Jr. He's been 14th or worse in 5 of the last 7 short tracks. So while the 78 was the dominant car in Las Vegas, this is far from a mile and a half. I expect him to struggle Saturday night in Richmond.
All right, you've got Blaney and Truex you're avoiding, so who are you looking at playing this week among playoff drivers?
Well, when you look at playoff drivers, I'm going to give you a list of 4, and it will start with the 4th favorite driver of mine this weekend, and that's the driver of the 14, Clint Bowyer. He was 9th at Richmond in April, his only top 10 in the last 5 races at that track. But think about this. Top 10s in the last 5 short track races. He had a gap in his career when he wasn't in the best equipment. He's back in great equipment, and I think it will show up this week at Richmond. Another driver that I think you're going to have to consider, my 3rd favorite of all the playoff drivers, Brad Keselowski. How can you avoid him? He has the hot hand. Do I have to say any more than that? It's the first time in his career he's ever won 3 races in a row, and it's more than just great race cards. It's great teamwork, great pit stops, great calls by Paul Wolfe. So I think he's another one you have to consider when you head to Richmond. Think about this. He really has nothing to lose, so maybe that gamble will pay off. He could go for 4 in a row. When I also look at playoff drivers, you can't avoid the Kyle and Kyle show. My 2nd favorite, Kyle Busch, finished 8th or better in 3 straight races and 8 of the last 9 races. He's also on a hot streak. His recovery in Las Vegas after that spin, that tells me that he's focused on the task at hand in the playoffs. And the other Kyle, my favorite playoff driver, Kyle Larson. Top 3 in 3 of the last 4 races of 2018. And let's not forget, the last career win for Kyle Larson, a short track, and it happens to be Richmond.
Let's look at some non-playoff drivers too, because this game does require you to pick non-playoff drivers every week in addition to your playoff drivers. So looking at Richmond, who do you like?
Well, it's difficult because there are still 16 drivers in the playoffs, so that leaves a limited amount of drivers that you would consider must start. So 3 names come to mind. You get Daniel Suarez, William Byron, and Ryan Newman. Those 3 guys I think you could consider. When you look at Ryan Newman, he's finished in the top 10 in the last 2 races in 2018 and 1 top 10 in the last 5 short track races. How about William Byron? He only has 1 race at Richmond, finished 12th, and the Hendrick cars have run well at the short tracks, so maybe the 24 can carry a little bit of the recent momentum into a good run under the lights Saturday night. But I think my number 1 non-playoff driver has to come out of the Joe Gibbs Racing camp. He's the only Joe Gibbs Racing driver not in the playoffs, and that's the 19 of Daniel Suarez. The Joe Gibbs Racing cars have won 4 of the last 6 Richmond races, so I expect him to also have a good run.
Okay, we've heard some of your avoids, we've heard who you're playing, so what's your lineup look like for this weekend?
Well, it's going to be no surprise that I'm going to start with number 1 playoff driver, Kyle Larson. I have to have him in the lineup without a doubt. I'm also going to have Kyle Busch. The Kyle and Kyle show for me. In non-playoff drivers, I have Daniel Suarez, William Byron, and the garage pick, I think this early in the playoffs, you have to stick with a playoff driver, Brad Keselowski. 3 in a row, I'm not going to bet against him now.
Do you think he can make it 4 in a row this weekend at Richmond?
Well, I think he has a chance, but I'm betting against him. I'm thinking the sentimental favorite. The pole sitter last week, he got caught up in an accident he had nothing to do with. Eric Jones gets his 2nd career win, but this time, it comes in the playoffs.
A little bit of redemption for Eric Jones, the number 20 team after Las Vegas. So let's see if Eric and that team can get it done. Be sure you guys set your lineups and tweet Steve and I with any questions you have throughout the race weekend.
And don't forget, guys, it's a Saturday night race, 7:30 p.m. on NBCSN. I'm going to hang out with Rick Allen. Somehow we thought it was a good idea. We put Dale Jr. and Jeff Burton in the same booth. It's going to be fun coverage.
And don't forget, you could drive off in a truck built by fans for fans. Head to NASCAR.com/playoffs promo now to enter for your chance to win the fan-built Chevy, Ford, or Toyota truck.